The emergency session alarm echoed through the massive council chamber, a sound that had not been heard in 300 years. Ambassador Minjun Park stood alone at the human delegation platform, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched 12 elder species representatives file into their elevated seats. The air smelled of recycled atmosphere and old power, the kind that came from ruling the galaxy for thousands of years. Chancellor Thexus of the Velcrin hierarchy settled into his seat with visible irritation. His blue skin darkened to purple, a sign of anger that every species in the chamber recognized. He had lived for 4,000 years and served as chancellor for 600. In all that time, no species had ever rejected 5 consecutive diplomatic proposals from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Park, Thexus began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Humanity has now rejected every offer of partnership we have extended. This is unprecedented. We demand an explanation. Minjun stepped forward calmly. He had expected this reaction. The council chamber held representatives from 40 species, but only the 12 elder races had real power. They sat in the high seats, while younger civilizations watched from the lower levels, silent and observant. Chancellor, we are grateful for the council's attention, Minjun said in clear, simple words. However, each proposal contained terms that Earth cannot accept. A wave of confused murmurs spread through the chamber. Supreme Commander Vekthar of the Mordekan Empire leaned forward, his red eyes narrowing. Cannot accept? We offered you trade agreements worth trillions. We offered you technology that would advance your civilization by centuries. We offered you protection from hostile forces in this sector. What civilized species refuses such gifts? Minjun met the commander's gaze without flinching. A species that values its principles more than convenience, Commander. A species that learned hard lessons from its own history. The murmurs grew louder. Archon Silthus of the Crystalline Collective made a sound like breaking glass, her species' equivalent of laughter. Principles? You speak of principles? Every species here abandoned such naive thinking when they joined galactic civilization. Principles are luxuries for children. The galaxy runs on practical agreements. Then perhaps the galaxy runs on the wrong foundation, Minjun replied quietly. The chamber fell silent. Even the junior species representatives, who usually kept their heads down and stayed quiet, looked up in shock. No one spoke to the elder races this way. Not if they wanted to survive. Chancellor Thexus raised one long-fingered hand. Explain yourself, human. Carefully. Minjun activated his data display. Images appeared in the air above the chamber floor, visible to everyone. The first proposal offered Earth access to galactic trade networks. The terms seemed generous. However, buried in Section 47 was the requirement that we adopt the Galactic Labor Protocol. This protocol permits indentured servitude for debt repayment that extends across 3 generations. Standard practice, Vekthar interrupted. Every member species uses this system. It ensures debts are paid and maintains economic stability. It is slavery, Minjun said simply. My species spent thousands of years practicing slavery. We fought wars to end it. Millions died to establish the principle that no person can be owned by another, regardless of debt or circumstance. We will not bring back that evil for any amount of wealth. The elder species representatives exchanged glances. Several looked genuinely confused, as if Minjun had just claimed that water should flow upward. The second proposal, Minjun continued, offered us advanced medical technology. In exchange, we would join the Council Defense Pact. This pact requires all members to respect the sovereign borders of other members, even when genocide occurs within those borders. Archon Silthus shifted in her crystalline seat. The principle of non-interference is sacred. We learned long ago that civilizations must solve their own internal problems. Interference only creates more conflict. Earth learned the opposite lesson, Minjun replied. We learned that silence in the face of mass murder makes us complicit. We learned that just following orders is not an excuse. We learned that sovereignty does not grant the right to commit atrocities. No medical technology is worth becoming accomplices to genocide. For the first time, Min Jun noticed movement in the lower seats. Several junior species representatives were paying very close attention now, their diplomatic masks slipping to show something like surprise or even hope. Chancellor Thexus leaned back, his expression darkening further. You rejected the third proposal because it included standard resource extraction agreements, the fourth because it recognized corporate sovereignty in designated zones, the fifth because it permitted labor optimization in mining colonies. All of these are foundational elements of galactic commerce and law. They have existed for millennia. Yes, Min Jun agreed, and each one violates principles that humanity considers sacred. Resource extraction without environmental restoration destroys worlds for short-term profit. Corporate sovereignty means corporations have more rights than living beings. Labor optimization in your mining colonies means children working in dangerous conditions because they have small hands. The silence that followed was absolute. Min Jun could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Finally, Vekthar spoke, his voice low and dangerous. You realize that your rejections are causing panic among our military strategists. They wonder if Earth is preparing for war. They wonder if your moral posturing is a cover for hostile intentions. We want peace, Min Jun said firmly. But we want peace built on justice, not peace built on accepting injustice for convenience. Then you are fools, Silthus declared. You doom your species to isolation. Without council membership, you will have no protection, no trade partners, no access to the resources you need to grow. Your principles will comfort you while your people suffer. Min Jun looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as he could. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the massive room. My species has a saying, it is better to die on your feet than live on your knees. We would rather struggle with our dignity intact than prosper by betraying everything we believe. If that makes us fools in your eyes, then we are proud to be fools. Chancellor Thexus stood slowly. This session is adjourned. The Council will deliberate on how to handle Earth's unprecedented behavior. Ambassador Park, you and your delegation will remain on the station until we reach a decision. As the elder species filed out of the chamber, Min Jun noticed something important. Many of the junior species representatives remained in their seats, watching him with expressions he could not quite read. Some looked afraid, but others looked like people who had just seen something they thought impossible. Something that made them dare to wonder if the galaxy could be different than they had always been told it must be. Ambassador Park Hye-jin sat in the human delegation quarters, reviewing files that stretched back 2 years. She was Min Jun's senior advisor and had been present for 3 of the 5 rejections. Each file showed the same pattern: generous offers, hidden poison. Do you remember Ambassador Choi? She asked Min Jun, who stood by the window looking out at the massive space station that housed the Galactic Council. I remember, Min Jun replied. She was my mentor. She taught me that sometimes the most important word in diplomacy is no. Hye-jin pulled up the first proposal on her screen. The Velcrin came to Earth with such ceremony. They made it seem like we were being welcomed into an exclusive club. Ambassador Choi was so excited at first. The memory played on the screen. 2 years ago in Seoul, Ambassador Choi Seo-yeon had stood before the United Earth Assembly with the Velcrin trade agreement displayed behind her. She had been smiling as she explained the benefits: access to markets spanning 300 worlds, technology transfers that would revolutionize Earth's industries, wealth beyond imagination. Then her expression had changed as she read deeper into the document. The smile had faded. Her hands had started to shake. Section 47, she had said quietly. The Galactic Labor Protocol. The assembly had grown quiet as she explained what the protocol meant. People could be bound to work for creditors across multiple generations. A grandfather's debt could force his grandchildren into servitude. The practice was so common in galactic civilization that the Velcrin had not even thought to hide it. They assumed Earth would accept it as normal. Ambassador Choi had walked to the podium and spoken words that would define Earth's relationship with the galaxy. Humanity fought too many wars to end slavery. We will not bring it back in a new form, no matter what we are offered. I reject this proposal on behalf of Earth. The Velcrin had been shocked. They had never encountered a species that would refuse wealth to maintain a principle. Min-jun turned from the window. What happened with the second proposal? Hye-jin switched files. This memory showed Dr. Han Ji-woo, Earth's chief medical representative, sitting across from a delegation of Xinthian medical experts. They had brought examples of their technology, cures for diseases that killed millions of humans every year, treatments that could extend human lifespans by decades, regeneration techniques that seemed like miracles. All of this can be yours, the Xinthian lead scientist had said. In exchange, Earth joins the Council Defense Pact. Simple protection agreement. We help you. You help us. Dr. Han had read through the pact with increasing horror. Her specialty was not just medicine, but medical ethics. She had spent years studying humanity's failures, including times when doctors had participated in terrible crimes by staying silent. This pact requires members to ignore genocide if it happens inside another member's borders, she had said slowly. You want us to have your medicine, but in exchange, we must promise to do nothing when we see mass murder? Sovereignty must be respected, the Xinthian had replied. Internal matters are internal. This is how galactic civilization maintains peace. Dr. Han had stood up, her face pale but her voice steady. My ancestors lived through genocide. They survived because some people refused to stay silent, because some people decided that stopping mass murder was more important than respecting borders. I cannot accept medicine paid for with a promise to look away from atrocity. No one should. She had walked out of the negotiations, and the second proposal died that day. The third proposal was mine, Hye-jin said quietly. Min-jun looked at her with sympathy. He knew that rejection had been personal for her. Hye-jin's file showed her sitting with the Prixian Commonwealth representatives. They had offered Earth a stake in their resource extraction operations across 17 worlds. The profits would have made Earth wealthy enough to solve every economic problem overnight. I was so tempted, Hye-jin admitted. The money would have fed billions, housed millions, educated everyone who needed it. But then I visited one of their extraction sites. The file showed video footage that still made Hye-jin feel sick. Entire planets stripped bare of resources, their ecosystems destroyed, nothing left but dead rock and poisoned water. The Prixian explained that this was efficient, that restoration was unnecessary, since there were always more worlds to exploit. In the old days, humans did this to Earth, Hye-jin had said to the Prixian representatives. We called it progress. We got rich while destroying our home. We almost killed ourselves before we learned better. Now, you want us to do the same thing to other worlds? These worlds have no intelligent life, the Prixian had countered. They are just resources. They are living systems, Hye-jin had replied. They have value beyond what we can extract from them. Earth learned this lesson the hard way. We will not unlearn it for money. The third proposal had been rejected, and the Prixian Commonwealth had left confused and angry. Min-jun pulled up the fourth file himself. Lee Tae-hyun handled this one. Ambassador Lee Tae-hyun appeared on the screen, sitting with representatives from the Mordakan Empire. They had offered Earth a seat on the Council Economic Committee, a position of real influence. In exchange, Earth would recognize the principle of corporate sovereignty in designated galactic zones. What does that mean exactly? Tae-hyun had asked. The Mordakan representative had explained patiently. In corporate sovereignty zones, companies had the same rights as governments. They could make their own laws, enforce their own justice, control their own territories. People who lived in these zones were subject to corporate law rather than any democratic process. Tae-hyun had been quiet for a long time. Then he had asked a simple question. What happens if someone in a corporate zone is treated unjustly? Where do they appeal? To the corporation, the Mordakan had replied. It is efficient. Corporations have incentive to keep workers productive, but no incentive to treat them as people with rights, Tae-hyun had said. You are telling me that in these zones, beings have no protection except what profits their owners. That is not government. That is not civilization. That is organized exploitation dressed in legal language. The fourth proposal had died in that moment. The fifth rejection had come just 3 weeks ago. The Crystalline Collective had offered Earth access to their educational networks, which would revolutionize human learning. The price was accepting what they called labor optimization in the galactic mining colonies. The human delegation had investigated what labor optimization meant. They found children working in mines because their small bodies could fit into tight spaces. The Crystalline Collective explained this was practical, that these children came from poor families who needed the income, that limiting this practice would hurt those families economically. The human representative had looked at the crystalline diplomat and said words that ended the negotiation instantly. We sent children into mines and factories once. We called it practical, too. Then we decided that childhood was worth more than profit. We will not go backward. Minjun closed all the files and looked at Hyejin. 5 proposals, 5 rejections. Each time we said no to something, the entire galaxy accepts as normal. And now they panic, Hyejin said, because they do not understand us. They think we must be preparing for war or trying to manipulate them. They cannot imagine that we simply mean what we say. A message alert chimed. Minjun opened it and his eyes widened. It is from the Talarian Confederation. Encrypted. He read the message twice to be sure he understood. The Talarians were a junior species, conquered 6 centuries ago, bound by the same labor protocols Earth had rejected. The message was simple. We have watched your courage. We wish we had been so brave. Please do not surrender. Some of us still remember what freedom felt like. Minjun showed the message to Hyejin. She read it and understood immediately what it meant. We are not just rejecting proposals anymore. We are giving others ideas, dangerous ideas about dignity and rights. The council is not going to like that, Minjun said. No, Hyejin agreed. They are going to panic even more. The council's private chamber was designed to project authority, but today it felt more like a cage. Chancellor Thexus looked at the other elder species representatives and saw something he had not seen in centuries: genuine fear. The humans have rejected everything, Archon Silthus said, her crystalline form pulsing with agitation. Every standard agreement, every normal term, every practice that holds our civilization together, they reject it all. Supreme Commander Vecthar slammed his fist on the table. This cannot stand. We should demonstrate our power. One show of force and they will understand their position. And if they still refuse? Asked Elder Morpheus of the Hive Collective. What then? Do we destroy them? Make martyrs of them? You have seen how the junior species watch them. Force will only make this worse. Thexus nodded slowly. Morpheus is correct. The humans are not the real problem. The problem is what their refusal represents. For the first time in millennia, a species is publicly rejecting the foundations of our order, and others are noticing. A holographic display activated in the center of the table. It showed communication intercepts from the past week, messages between junior species representatives, carefully encrypted but not carefully enough. The Talarian Confederation had sent 17 separate messages to other conquered species, all discussing humanity's stand. The Prixian Commonwealth, drowning in debt from the labor protocols they had accepted generations ago, was having internal debates about whether their agreement could be renegotiated. The Eurylian Assembly had begun asking questions about the Council Defense Pact and why they had to ignore suffering in neighboring systems. "This is spreading," Archon Silthus observed, "like a disease of thought. The humans planted an idea, and it is growing in minds that should have accepted their place long ago. They call it hope," Elder Morpheus said quietly. "I have studied the intercepted messages. The junior species see humanity's refusal as proof that our system is not inevitable. They are beginning to question everything." Vekthar leaned forward, his expression dark. "Then we isolate Earth completely. Cut them off from all trade, all communication, all contact. We make an example of them. Show the galaxy what happens to species that reject our order." "That will take time," Thexus pointed out, "and in that time the idea spreads further. No, we need a different approach. We need to understand why the humans think this way. What makes them so willing to sacrifice their own interests for these principles?" A side door opened and Ambassador Lee Tae-hyun entered, accompanied by 2 council guards. He had been summoned without explanation, pulled from the human quarters with barely enough time to prepare. But his expression was calm as he stood before the elder species. "Ambassador Lee," Thexus said, "we want to understand something. Your species rejects practices that benefit you because of moral concerns, but these practices exist in the galaxy for good reasons. They solve real problems. Why can you not see that?" Tae-hyun took a moment before responding. "May I tell you a story from Earth's history?" "If you must," Silthus replied. 300 years ago, my nation was poor. Very poor. Our children were starving. Foreign companies came and offered us a deal. They would build factories, provide jobs, bring wealth. In exchange, we had to let them write their own rules, ignore their treatment of workers, allow children to work in their facilities. We were told this was practical, that it was the only way. Tae-hyun's voice remained steady, but his eyes showed old pain. We accepted. For 50 years we prospered by your definition. Money flowed in. The nation grew richer, but our people suffered in ways that do not show in economic statistics. Children lost their childhoods. Workers lost their dignity. We lost our souls. But you survived, Vekthar countered. You grew strong enough to eventually change those practices. This proves the system works. No, Tae-hyun said firmly. It proves that we paid a terrible price that we are still recovering from generations later. It proves that some prices are not worth paying, no matter the benefit. We learned that lesson. Why would we forget it now? Thexus studied the human carefully. You truly believe this? Even knowing it isolates you? Even knowing it makes you vulnerable? Yes, Tae-hyun replied simply. Because we know something you seem to have forgotten. Civilization built on injustice is not civilization. It is just organized cruelty with better decorations. Before anyone could respond, an urgent alarm sounded. A junior aide rushed into the chamber, forgetting protocol in his haste. Chancellor, we have a situation. The Talarian Confederation has formally requested permission to address the full council. They claim to have important matters regarding the human proposals. The elder species exchanged worried glances. The Talarians had been silent for 600 years, accepting their subordinate position without complaint. Their sudden activism was unprecedented. It gets worse, the aide continued. The Prixian Commonwealth, The Eurylian Assembly and 14 other junior species have submitted similar requests. They want to speak about human principles and council policies. The panic in the room became palpable. 17 species, representing billions of beings, suddenly finding their voices at the same time, all inspired by humanity's refusals. "This is a coordinated effort," Morpheus said. "The humans did not just reject our proposals, they created a movement." Tae-hyun looked genuinely surprised. "We did not coordinate with any other species. We simply stated our position." "Your position is a spark," Thexis said, standing slowly. "And you threw it into a room full of kindling we forgot was there. Ambassador, you may return to your quarters. We need to discuss this development." After Tae-hyun left, the elder species sat in stunned silence. Finally, Silthus spoke. "We have 3 choices. First, we can use force to suppress both humanity and the junior species who support them. Second, we can try to wait this out and hope the movement dies. Third, we can actually consider what the humans propose." "The third option is impossible," Vecthar insisted. "Our entire civilization is built on the systems they want to change. We cannot restructure everything because one species has moral objections." "Can we not?" Elder Morpheus asked. "Or do we simply fear what we would become if we tried? The humans claim their principles make them stronger, not weaker. What if they are right?" "Then we have been wrong for thousands of years," Thexis said quietly. "We have built our prosperity on the suffering of others and called it civilization. We have ignored injustice and called it stability. We have sacrificed principles for convenience and called it maturity." The Chancellor looked around at his fellow leaders. "I have ruled for 600 years. In that time, I have made countless decisions I believed were necessary. But I never asked if they were right. The humans ask that question constantly. Perhaps that is why they terrify us." Archon Silthus's crystalline form flickered. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we face a choice," Thexis replied. "We can fight to preserve a system that the humans have exposed as fundamentally unjust. Or we can find the courage to question whether thousands of years of tradition justify continued wrong. Neither choice is easy, but one is honest." "The junior species are waiting for our response," Morpheus reminded them. "As are the humans, as is the entire galaxy. What we decide in the next few days will determine the future of galactic civilization itself." Vecthar stood abruptly. "I need time to think. This is too much, too fast. We are talking about changing everything we know." "Yes," Thexis agreed, "because one species had the courage to say no. And now others are finding that same courage. The question is whether we have the courage to listen." The meeting adjourned with nothing resolved. But everyone in that room knew that the galaxy had reached a turning point. The humans had not brought weapons or threats. They had brought something far more dangerous, the simple question of whether the way things were was the way things should be. The full council chamber had never been so crowded. Every species with representation had sent their ambassadors. The balconies were filled with observers. The air hummed with tension and anticipation. Something fundamental was about to happen, and everyone wanted to witness it. Min-jun stood at the human platform, but he was not alone. Behind him stood Ambassador Lee Tae-hyun and advisor Park Hye-jin. To their surprise, they had received a message that morning from 17 junior species requesting to stand with Earth during this session. The council had reluctantly agreed. Chancellor Thexis called the session to order. His expression was unreadable, but Min-jun noticed the Chancellor looked tired, as if he had not slept in days. "Ambassador Park, you requested this open forum. The Council has granted your request. You may present humanity's vision for galactic civilization." Min-jun bowed respectfully and stepped forward. But instead of speaking himself, he gestured to his left where a young woman approached the platform. Representative Yoon Min-seo was only 32 years old, the youngest member of Earth's diplomatic corps. She had survived the Pacific War, the last major conflict on Earth before unified government was established. She carried scars on her body and wisdom in her eyes. "Honorable Council members," Yun Minseo began, her voice clear and strong. "I am here to present not just humanity's proposal, but our answer to the question you have been asking. Why do we reject your systems? The answer is simple. We remember what it cost us to build something better." She activated a holographic display that showed images from Earth's history. Wars, famines, environmental collapse, slavery, genocide. The images were brutal and honest, hiding nothing of humanity's failures. "This is what Earth looked like when we operated on the same principles that govern your galactic civilization. We exploited the weak. We sacrificed people for profit. We ignored suffering that was not our immediate concern. We called it practical. We called it necessary. We called it the way things must be." Yun Minseo let the images speak for themselves before continuing. "But some humans began to ask a dangerous question. What if there is a better way? What if we could build civilization on justice instead of exploitation? On cooperation instead of domination? On shared dignity instead of hierarchy?" The display changed to show Earth's transformation over the past 200 years. Cities powered by clean energy, industries that produced without destroying, people from every nation working together. It was not perfect, but it was fundamentally different from what came before. We learned that treating people with dignity makes them more productive, not less. We learned that protecting the environment creates long-term wealth instead of destroying it. We learned that preventing atrocities is easier than stopping them once they start. We learned that investing in all people raises everyone up. Archon Silthus interrupted. "This works on one planet with one species. You cannot possibly believe it would work across hundreds of worlds with fundamentally different civilizations." Yun Minseo smiled. "Earth is not one civilization, Archon. We have thousands of cultures, hundreds of languages, dozens of religions, countless different ways of understanding the world. 200 years ago, we were killing each other over these differences. Today, we work together because we built systems based on principles that work for everyone." She pulled up a detailed document that appeared in the air for everyone to see. "This is humanity's proposal. It addresses every system we rejected and offers alternatives that achieve the same goals without moral compromise." The document was comprehensive. For the labor protocol, humanity proposed genuine employment systems with fair wages, worker mobility, and education opportunities. Instead of binding people through debt, the system invested in them, creating more skilled and productive workers. For the Defense Pact, humanity suggested collective responsibility to prevent atrocities rather than ignore them. Early intervention prevented conflicts from escalating, saving resources and lives. The proposal included systems for mediation and peacekeeping that respected sovereignty while protecting innocence. For resource extraction, humanity outlined sustainable practices that maintained ecosystem health while meeting economic needs. The proposal showed how restored worlds could be used multiple times instead of destroyed once, creating long-term value instead of short-term profits. For corporate sovereignty zones, humanity proposed democratic oversight that balanced economic efficiency with individual rights. Companies could operate effectively while workers maintained dignity and protection. For labor optimization, humanity offered education and automation investments that eliminated dangerous work while creating better opportunities for everyone, especially children who deserved childhood regardless of their family's economic situation. Supreme Commander Vecthar studied the proposal with obvious skepticism. "This is idealistic fantasy. The costs of implementing such systems would be enormous. Who pays for this transformation?" "Everyone," Yun Minseo replied. "And no one. Our analysis shows that these systems are actually more efficient long-term. Healthy workers produce more than exploited ones. Sustainable resource extraction provides steady income instead of boom and collapse. Prevention costs less than war. Investment in people pays returns across generations. Impossible, Vecthar said flatly. We are already doing it, Yun Min Seo countered, and we are not alone. At this signal, the representatives from the 17 junior species stood together. The Talarian ambassador spoke first, his voice shaking slightly but determined. The Talarian Confederation has studied Earth's proposal carefully. We have been bound by the labor protocol for 600 years. In that time, our productivity has stagnated, our people have suffered, and our civilization has been frozen in place. We announce today that we will adopt humanity's employment framework in our territory and withdraw from the current labor protocol system. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Chancellor Thexus leaned forward sharply. You cannot simply withdraw from established agreements. We can, the Talarian replied. And we will. Earth has shown us that another way exists. We choose dignity over convenience. One by one, the other 16 species made similar announcements. The Prixian Commonwealth would implement sustainable resource practices. The Eurylian Assembly would join humanity's defense framework. Others committed to various elements of Earth's proposal. By the time they finished, 40% of the Council's junior membership had aligned with humanity's principles. The elder species sat in stunned silence. Then Archon Silthis stood, her crystalline form crackling with energy. This is coordinated rebellion. This is an attempt to overturn thousands of years of established order. We cannot allow it. With respect, Archon, Yun Min Seo said calmly. This is not rebellion. This is choice. These species are choosing to try something different. You can oppose them with force, proving that your civilization is built on coercion. Or you can join them in experimenting with systems that might work better for everyone. Elder Morpheus of the Hive Collective stood slowly. All eyes turned to him. The Hive Collective was the second oldest civilization in the Council, nearly as influential as the Velkrin. I have listened carefully, Morpheus said. I have studied Earth's proposal. I have watched the courage of these junior species. And I have reflected on 6,000 years of my civilization's history. He paused, and the chamber waited in absolute silence. The Hive Collective will pilot humanity's frameworks in 3 of our systems. We will test whether these idealistic principles produce the practical results Earth claims. If they succeed, we will expand implementation. If they fail, we will have evidence instead of assumptions. The announcement hit like a shockwave. If the Hive Collective was willing to try, the dam had broken. Chancellor Thexus looked around at his fellow elder species. Some looked angry, some looked frightened, but some, like Morpheus, looked thoughtful. This session is adjourned, Thexus said heavily. We will reconvene in 1 week to discuss implementation frameworks. It seems that humanity has done more than reject our proposals. They have offered us a mirror to see what we have become. Whether we like what we see remains to be determined. As the chamber emptied, Min Jun felt Yun Min Seo's hand on his arm. She was smiling through tears. We did it, she whispered. We made them listen. No, Min Jun replied, looking at the 17 junior species representatives who had stood with them. We showed them they had a choice. They made themselves listen, and that makes all the difference. 6 months had passed since the day that changed everything. Chancellor Thexus stood in his private office, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. The data was surprising, even shocking, but it was undeniable. The Talarian Confederation had fully implemented humanity's employment framework. Their economy, stagnant for 600 years, had grown by 18%. Worker productivity had increased even more dramatically. Perhaps most telling, Talarian scientists had published more research in 6 months than in the previous 60 years combined. Freed from generational debt and given opportunities to develop their skills, the Talarian people were flourishing in ways that centuries of the old system had never achieved. A knock on his door interrupted Thexus's thoughts. "Enter," he called. Elder Morpheus walked in, his expression carefully neutral, but with something that might have been satisfaction in his eyes. "You have seen the Hive collective reports?" Morpheus asked. "I have," Thexus replied. "Your 3 pilot systems show similar results to the Talarians. Crime has dropped, innovation has increased. Your people report higher satisfaction with their lives." "What surprises me most," Morpheus said, settling into a chair, "is the economic data. We expected the human systems to work morally but cost us efficiency. Instead, they are more efficient. Treating beings with dignity and investing in their development produces better results than exploitation." Thexus moved to his window, looking out at the vast station that housed galactic civilization's heart. "The Prixian Commonwealth report came in this morning. They have begun environmental restoration on 7 worlds they previously strip-mined. Early data suggests that restored worlds can be used for sustainable resource extraction that produces 70% of the original yield indefinitely instead of 100% once, then nothing forever." "The mathematics are compelling," Morpheus agreed. "Short-term thinking created short-term wealth. Long-term thinking creates sustainable prosperity." "It is more than mathematics," Thexus said quietly. "It is humility. The humans were willing to suffer to uphold their principles. We were so certain that our thousands of years of experience made us wise. But we had confused age with wisdom, tradition with truth." Another message arrived on Thexus's display. He read it and allowed himself a small smile. "Supreme Commander Vecthar has submitted a proposal to restructure the Council Defense Pact along the lines of humanity's framework. He claims it is purely for strategic efficiency, but the proposal includes provisions for humanitarian intervention and atrocity prevention." "Vecthar is learning," Morpheus observed. "Slowly, but learning. The old warrior discovers that preventing wars is more strategically sound than fighting them." Over the next weeks, similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Eurylian Assembly had mediated 3 border disputes using humanity's conflict resolution frameworks, preventing wars before they started. The Crystalline Collective, initially the most resistant, had shut down their labor optimization programs and invested in education for mining colony children. Early results showed that educated young adults with specialized skills were far more valuable than children with small hands. Perhaps most significantly, the economic data showed that treating workers well and investing in communities created consumer bases that could actually purchase the goods being produced. Exploitation extracted maximum immediate value but destroyed the markets that sustained long-term growth. Justice was not just moral, it was economically superior. The Council reconvened in full session to review the data and vote on comprehensive reforms. The chamber looked different now. The high seats and low seats remained, but the psychological divide between them had begun to erode. Junior species representatives spoke with confidence, knowing their voices mattered. Elder species listened with genuine attention, recognizing that wisdom could come from unexpected places. Minjun and his delegation attended as honored guests. They watched as Chancellor Thexus called the session to order. 6 months ago, humanity rejected every proposal we offered them, Thexus began. We panicked. We saw their refusals as attacks on our civilization. We were wrong. Their refusals were invitations to become something better. The Chancellor pulled up comprehensive data from 43 systems that had implemented various elements of humanity's frameworks. Every metric showed improvement: economic growth, social stability, innovation rates, public health, environmental recovery, conflict reduction. The evidence is clear, Thexus continued. The systems we defended for thousands of years were not optimal. They were familiar. We confused our comfort with correctness. Humanity showed us an alternative, and brave species tested whether it worked. The results speak for themselves. Archon Silthus stood, her crystalline form pulsing with what might have been embarrassment. The crystalline collective formally apologizes to Earth. We called your principles naive idealism. We were wrong. Your principles are sophisticated realism. You understood what we had forgotten, that civilization's purpose is not efficiency for its own sake, but the flourishing of the beings within it. One by one, the elder species made similar acknowledgments. Even Supreme Commander Vecthar, gruff and clearly uncomfortable, admitted that humanity's defense framework produced better strategic outcomes than the old pact. We therefore propose, Thexus announced, comprehensive reformation of galactic civilization according to frameworks developed by Earth and refined through collaboration with species who piloted these changes. The Galactic Labor Protocol will be abolished and replaced with the Dignity Employment System. The Council Defense Pact will be restructured around prevention and protection. Environmental exploitation will give way to sustainable development. Corporate sovereignty zones will be reformed to balance efficiency with rights. All forms of child exploitation will be eliminated with investments in education and development. These changes will not be easy, Thexus continued. Many of us will need to admit we were wrong. Many practices we defended will need to be abandoned. Many systems we relied on will need to be rebuilt. But the evidence shows that this transformation will make us stronger, not weaker, more prosperous, not poorer, more stable, not less. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 87% of the Council approved the comprehensive reforms. Galactic civilization would be rebuilt on foundations of justice rather than convenience. After the session ended, Chancellor Thexus approached the human delegation privately. His ancient eyes met Minjun's young ones. You came to us 2 years ago as supplicants, hoping for acceptance into our civilization. Instead, you rejected everything we offered and showed us we needed to change. How did you have such courage? Minjun thought carefully before answering. It was not just courage, Chancellor. It was memory. We remembered what it cost us to build justice on Earth. We remembered the suffering that came from choosing convenience over principle. We remembered that every time humans said, "This wrong is necessary," we later discovered it was not necessary at all, just easier. We refused to forget those lessons for any reward you could offer. And if we had responded with force instead of listening, Thexus asked. Then we would have resisted, Minjun replied simply, and lost. But we would have lost with our dignity intact. Sometimes that is all you can control, whether you compromise your principles or stand by them regardless of consequences. We chose to stand. Yun Min Seo stepped forward. Chancellor, may I say something? Of course, Representative. You asked how we had courage, but the real courage was yours. You could have crushed us. You could have forced conformity. Instead, you questioned traditions that lasted thousands of years. You admitted you might be wrong. You tried something different despite your fear. That is the courage that actually changed things. Thexus was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps courage is contagious, he finally said. You showed us it was possible to question the way things are. We showed others it was possible to try new ways. Now the entire galaxy is learning that change is not catastrophe but opportunity. He extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting that had become popular across the Reformed Council. Thank you for your rejections, Ambassador Park. They were the most valuable gift anyone has given galactic civilization in millennia. Minjun shook the Chancellor's hand. Thank you for listening. That took courage we could not give you. You found it yourselves. As the human delegation prepared to leave the station, they passed through corridors now filled with representatives from dozens of species working together in new ways. A Talarian educator shared teaching methods with a Velcrin scholar. A Prixian engineer collaborated with a human environmentalist on restoration techniques. A young crystalline student laughed with friends from 6 different species. "Do you think it will last?" Hyejin asked quietly. Minjun watched a group of children from multiple species playing together in a station garden that had been built where a weapons storage facility once stood. "I think it will be tested," he replied. "Old habits return easily. Convenience always tempts more than justice. But they have seen now that another way is possible. They have evidence that it works. And most importantly, they made the choice themselves. No one forced them to change. They chose it. Then they will defend it," Yun Minseo said with certainty. "People fight hardest for the things they choose freely." The 3 humans stood together, looking out at a galaxy that was learning the lesson Earth had paid so dearly to discover. That civilization's strength does not come from how efficiently it exploits the weak, but from how courageously it protects the vulnerable. That lasting peace requires justice, not just absence of open war. That the most practical thing any society can do is treat all its members with dignity. The panic that had erupted when humanity rejected every proposal had transformed into something unexpected. Hope that the galaxy could be better than it had been. And that hope, once planted and carefully tended, would be very difficult to kill. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not technology or military might. It was the simple, revolutionary idea that things did not have to be the way they had always been. That "this is how we have always done it" was not an argument, but an admission. That courage to say no to wrong, even when everyone else accepted it, could inspire others to find their own courage to demand better. As their ship departed the station carrying them home to Earth, Minjun allowed himself to feel something he had not felt since this began. Genuine optimism about the galaxy's future. They had not conquered anyone. They had not forced change through power. They had simply refused to compromise their principles and invited others to question theirs. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is not a gun, but a question. And the most dangerous words in any language are simple ones. What if there is a better way?